only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stockbox interview.
Joining us today is Dr. Valentino Paravicini, the Chief Scientific Officer for Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies. So first of all, a Happy New Year to you, Valentino. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, Mark, and Happy New Year to you. And thank you again for having me to your podcast.
It's always good to talk to you, Valentino. Of course, we are going to be discussing the news released this morning from the company. That's the news of the submission of the clinical trial application for the phase 1 clinical trials, as we spoke about with Clarissa towards the end of last year, getting the plans for 2023. And here we are, the first full week of the year. You've managed to get it submitted. So let me just first of all get your reaction to this. It's a big milestone for the company, for you and all the people behind the research and the planning.
Yes, it is. It is very excellent news for all the people involved in the project, our collaborators outside the company, the scientists and other colleague here at OCT. And eventually, we think excellent news for the investor. And of course, I think most importantly, eventually would be excellent news for the patient whose well-being and quality of life are over paramount to our efforts.
Did it take a lot of work? You mentioned earlier that you had a holiday period, but there was still some work to do running up to this.
Yes, there was. It's the final touches, if you want, but very so important. The documentation, as you can imagine, has to be submitted to the regulator. In this case, it's a combined clinical trial application, meaning while in the past you had to apply for the MHRA and for the ethical committees, now you do one application for both, but it's a massive amount of work. There are about 30 and odd documents involved, some big, some small, covering both the preclinical studies and the preclinical work, but also the documents that are going to, for the protocol for the clinical trial as such, for the interaction with the patient, what they call face interacting documents. Therefore, it is a lot of work, and you have to make sure that everything is top notch and spick and span, so to speak. So we had to do that to make sure that application was timely, but also accurate.
Excellent. So does that mean now that you can relax a little bit now that all that hard work is done, now that it goes to the phase 1 trials? Maybe you can explain a little bit about what happens during phase 1 trials. I know it's mostly about the proving its safety, isn't it? But I wonder if you could just give us a little idea.
Yes, well, actually, no, there's no time to relax. But you would like to think so, but no. And we're very happy for what happened. It's exciting, but we actually need to ready to move to the next step. First of all, the document has to be reviewed by the regulators, and of course, we would like to comment. We think it's going to be minor, hopefully so. But then we need to prepare for the clinical trial, and there's a lot of work. It's not just sometimes I say the clinical trial is not just the clinical trial as giving the drug to the patient, but it's all the preparation, the documentation. I say patient, but often I meant healthy volunteer. So you need to recruit them. You need to prepare them. You need to provide all the information to them so that they enter, knowing what is that the clinical trial, of course, is safe. But also what happened with interaction with the regulator after that, the decision that have to be made during the clinical trial and all out records and maintain and analyze the data that you collect. So there's a lot of work in preparation for that. So there's no relaxing. As you mentioned, once the clinical trial is started, this is a first in human clinical trial, and it is due to commence at the end of March. Will be conducted in the UK, particularly at the facility of Simberg Orion in Wales. That's why we submitted also with the Research Ethics Committee, or REC, in fact, in Wales. It's a single ascending dose. What it means is that the healthy volunteer will first receive a dose that is low dose, so to speak, that is being decided based on the data that we collected during these months and months of work. Once we assess that it's safe, then we can increase the dose for the second cohort, and so forth and so forth. We have planning for cohort, although there could be more if needed. The important aspect is to make sure that what we think is the efficacious dose stays right in the middle. So we have a very safe dose, the efficacious dose, and then doses that probably are higher what we would need it, but we still have to prove they are safe. And as I say probably the word safety too many times, but that's the centerpiece of the work. Although it is also important to note that this is also about providing pivotal information in terms of what is called the pharmacokinetic profile, meaning how the compound is absorbed into the body, distributes into the body, and then eventually is excreted or eliminated. So we need to check that what we are projected based on the actual work that we've done in the preclinical studies, with all the projection and the modeling that's been done with basically computing, are actually corresponding and they're matching. So at this point, we will have all information to make sure that we are safe and, again, efficacious than in human.
Okay, so you mentioned they're hoping to start the trials actually in March. How long typically would a trial take on average, a phase 1 trial?
Yeah, it depends on how many cohorts that we have. It will take a couple of months.
Okay.
It is important to note that, again, although you would think that it would be faster because it's a first in human, but the reality, again, because safety is in paramount, once you finish to dosing the patient, you need to check that, again, that the study, the data that you generate in preclinical are more or less literally replicated in the clinical. And only then you can make the decision on whether you need to move to the next cohort, so to the next group with a higher dose. And of course, there are two situations that can generate. And the first one is that you underestimated, actually, for example, the exposure to your drug, so how much drug actually goes into the blood of the patient. In the case, you have to make a decision whether your initial plan has to be downside a bit, so basically reducing the second dose, or vice versa. It could be that it's the same or a bit better exposure, lower exposure, and in this case, you can increase the second dosage. So you need to leave a space, a time that is needed for the review of all the data you generated, and to make a decision. There's actually a proper meeting in which the scientists sit down and decide whether it's safe to proceed to the next cohort. So you need to allow that. And that's why with 3 cohorts in 3 weeks in between cohorts, you have a couple of months basically of length for the clinical trial.
Okay, well, 2 months is not too bad though, really, in the grand scheme of things, certainly not in an investing sort of mindset as well. So if everything goes according to plan, then really the first half of this year, you could be looking at having the results.
Yes, that's what we aim. There's obviously sort of, if you want to call it, soft result and hard results. The soft result is basically, in a way, every cohort will be, every component of the clinical trial will be reviewed. So basically, after the first week, we already have some results, knowing whether the compound is safe, of course, as we think, or not. Hopefully, and that happens every new cohort. So at the end of the clinical trial, we know if it's well tolerated and how the compound is behaving. That's what we call the soft results, so to speak. So we know, but then, of course, they have to be recorded electronically. The analysis has to be vetted and quality checked. Sure. And then later on, we're going to have the sort of hard lock, if you call it, where everything is established and so forth. So we, as you said, by the end of the first half, so Q2 2023, we should have the clinical trial completed and the results locked in a soft fashion.
Excellent. But in terms of, you say there about sort of soft results, the investors can expect to see them coming through almost a week or 2 after it started. So that's very good.
Yes. Of course, we will actually be careful of providing information while the clinical trial is performing, but we will try as much as we can, of course, to keep the investor informed. Okay. In a way, if there are sort of good results, especially no news, good news. If there are, unfortunately, negative results, of course, there would be. We're bound to obviously inform everybody involved. But obviously, we hope, and the way we prepare the clinical trial is such that we placed all that safety pickets, if you want, that should avoid any serious adverse events. And in this case, as I say, we will in due course inform the investors without being too excessive in our optimism, so to speak.
Excellent. Okay, and just looking finally at the first quarter here, of course, we're looking at the first quarter as you head towards that actual starting of phase one. What are some of the key things that we can look out for, the market can look out for? And also, is there any risk here? You're still going through the application process. Is there still a small amount of risk that it might not get accepted into phase one, or are you fairly happy those risks have been minimized?
We are happy that the risks have been minimized. We invested a lot of time and efforts to collaborate with what are, I like to say, top-notch collaborators, which have the advantage of having a lot of experience in be guiding us together with experience that we have internally at OCT to make sure that all the package that we generate, that is quite big, is actually have all the information that are needed. All the results have been, again, verified, if you want, not only by ourselves at OCT, but by our collaborators. And they are very supportive, and we're very supportive in suggesting the way we should try to do the clinical trial. We should design the clinical trial, what is called the clinical trial protocol, but also the fact that we could go in clinical trial. So there might be minor formal elements that might be reviewed if the MHRA or the ethical committee are concerned about some aspect of the experiment that maybe they'd not be described in a certain way. We will go back, but I think that, I'm quite confident and optimistic that all the work that we've done is going to be satisfactory.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Valentino Parravicini, the Chief Scientific Officer there for Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies, for your time today. No,
thank you, Mark. Thank you, and Happy New Year to everybody again.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.